My name is Naomi, I'm 34, and a revelation I had yesterday left me in shock. My parents have chosen to leave all their assets to my brother in their will. For the past 6 years, I've taken care of mortgage payments, medical expenses, and home maintenance, while my older brother, Travis, seldom reaches out. While looking for insurance documents yesterday, I stumbled across their revised will, which bequeaths everything to him. My heart dropped, but I decided I had to take action. When my mom texted me asking for money for the mortgage, my brief response ignited a series of events she never anticipated. Before I delve into what transpired, I invite you to comment on your location, give a like, and subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked by family. Trust me, the way this unfolds is something you don't want to miss. I grew up in a humble neighborhood in Cincinnati, Ohio. My parents, Edward and Catherine, worked tirelessly to provide for both Travis and me. My dad was an accountant at a small firm, while my mom taught 3rd grade at our local elementary school. We weren't wealthy, but we had sufficient means. My dad always stressed the importance of saving and financial prudence, making the recent situation even more ironic. From an early age, it was evident that my parents treated Travis and me differently. He is 3 years my senior and has a charismatic charm that captivates when he chooses to use it. He could make our parents laugh until tears streamed down their faces with his stories and impressions. People naturally gravitated toward him, and my parents glowed with pride whenever they heard compliments about him. However, beneath his charm was a long-standing pattern of irresponsibility. Travis often neglected chores without reminders, and his room looked like it had been through a storm. He frequently forgot assignments and misplaced permission slips. Yet, my parents always found an explanation. "He's just so creative. Creative minds can be messy," my mom would say with a fond smile as she picked up his littered clothes. "Your brother has profound ideas. He overlooks the details because he focuses on the greater vision," my dad would say when Travis didn't pass another math exam. In contrast, I was seen as the responsible child. I submitted my assignments promptly, kept my spaces tidy, and adhered to rules. My conscientious behavior elicited little admiration. Instead, it was simply expected. Of course, Naomi did her homework. "That's just her nature," they would remark, implying that my sense of responsibility was inherent rather than a conscious decision I made daily. After high school, I financed my college education primarily on my own with minimal assistance from my parents. I took out loans, worked part-time for 20 hours a week at the campus bookstore, and earned a marketing degree. It took me 5 years rather than 4 because I had to take fewer courses to balance work. In contrast, Travis attended a costly private university, which my parents fully funded. He switched majors 3 times before dropping out in his junior year to discover himself. This self-exploration included a 6-month trip across Europe, all financed by my parents. "College isn't for everyone," Mom remarked when he returned without a degree or future plans. "He just needs to find his path." Next followed a decade where Travis bounced from one endeavor to another. He launched a gourmet food truck, a photography business, and tried importing handcrafted furniture from Bali. Each venture began with enthusiasm but ended when the initial excitement tapered off, or when actual work was required. Each financial failure was largely covered by my parents, who dug into their retirement savings to support his aspirations. Meanwhile, I systematically constructed my career, starting as a marketing assistant and progressing to a marketing director at a healthcare firm. I dedicated long hours, attended weekend professional development sessions, and made strategic job moves to elevate my pay and responsibilities. By age 30, I had firmly established myself and reached financial stability. However, around that time, my parents faced economic setbacks. The financial crisis hit my father's firm hard, significantly reducing his income. My mother developed arthritis, leading her to cut back her teaching hours. Their medical bills surged, and they began to fall behind on their mortgage. That's when I intervened. Initially, it was just occasional help with unexpected costs, like when their water heater malfunctioned. Soon, I was regularly contributing to their mortgage payments. Eventually, I found myself giving them $2,000 monthly and covering all medical expenses not insured. Throughout this period, Travis continued his pattern of failed ventures and joblessness. He would find a temporary job in a restaurant or retail store, only to leave as he felt it stifled his creativity or his ideas weren't valued. He resided in a subsidized studio apartment and drove a car gifted to him by my parents for his 30th birthday. When I suggested that Travis needed to contribute as well, Dad remarked that my brother was experiencing a tough time. Mom chimed in, stating he lacks your strength. You have always been the self-sufficient one. During these challenging years, the support from my best friend Melissa proved to be crucial. She consistently highlighted how unjust the circumstances were. They are taking advantage of you, Nat, she would remind me over our weekly coffee chats. You have to establish boundaries. My boyfriend David offered a more nuanced viewpoint. With a background of parents who valued familial duties, he recognized my willingness to assist, but he also urged me to prioritize my well-being. You can support your parents without jeopardizing your future, he counseled me. Even with the financial pressures, I kept assisting my parents. I postponed purchasing a house, opting to rent a modest apartment to minimize costs. I drove my old car, which required repairs more frequently. I delayed vacations and cut back on retirement savings, all because of my love for my parents and my belief in familial support. In contrast, Travis seldom visited our parents. He would only reach out on birthdays and holidays or drop by when he needed something. Yet, they continually made excuses for his infrequent visits and celebrated his minor gestures as if they were remarkable. Just last weekend, he brought flowers. Wasn't that sweet? Mom would exclaim, disregarding my efforts of paying for their groceries, cleaning their gutters, and escorting Dad to his doctor's appointments that same week. While I never anticipated acknowledgement, the continual praise directed at Travis, while my contributions went unrecognized, began to exhaust me. Nonetheless, I convinced myself that this phase was temporary, believing my parents would eventually acknowledge my efforts and that my brother would grow up and assume responsibility. I was mistaken on all fronts. The Saturday I stumbled upon the will started like any other visit to my parents' home. It was early April, tax season, and I volunteered to assist with organizing their financial documents as Mom had expressed feeling inundated with paperwork. Dad, despite his profession as an accountant, had become increasingly disorganized with age. I'm glad you're here, Mom said, greeting me warmly. She appeared worn out, with her arthritis particularly flaring that day. Your father has papers scattered everywhere, and I can't make heads or tails of it. Dad looked up from his recliner, nodding in recognition of my arrival without standing. The files are chaotic, he confessed. Aging isn't easy, Naomi. I spent the morning sifting through medical bills, insurance documents, and bank statements at the dining room table. By noon, I established a structured filing system and helped pinpoint several billing inaccuracies that I promised to investigate further. Oh, wait, before I forget, Mom said as she set a sandwich in front of me. Can you locate our health insurance policy? I needed to inquire about that denied physical therapy claim. Sure, I responded. Where should I look? Probably in your father's office, she suggested. Check the filing cabinet. Dad's office had once been my small bedroom, transformed into his workspace filled with books, papers, and mementos from his 4 decades as an accountant. The filing cabinet, in the corner, was overflowing with documents. I started to systematically examine the drawers, creating organized piles on the desk as I went. In the far back of the bottom drawer, I discovered a sizable manila envelope labeled as a will and testament updated January 23rd. Just 3 months had passed since the update. I hadn't planned on reading it, as it was their private matter, but as I lifted the envelope, the unsealed flap opened, and several pages tumbled onto the floor. As I picked them up, my gaze fell on a mention of my name in a paragraph at the bottom of one page. Overcome by curiosity, I began to read. The language was formal and legal, but the content was clear. Upon their passing, my parents were leaving their house, all financial assets, insurance policies, and personal belongings to Travis, with the exception of a set of china that belonged to Catherine's mother, which was designated for me, Naomi. It felt as though I had been hit in the gut. The china set was old, incomplete, and held little financial or sentimental worth. It had been neglected in the attic for years, and I had never shown any interest in it. My hands began to tremble as I reread the paragraph, thinking I must have misinterpreted it, but it was explicitly stated. Travis would inherit everything of significance, while I would receive a dusty collection of dishes. I lost track of time sitting there, the papers shaking in my grasp, until Mom eventually came to find me. "Did you locate the insurance policy?" she inquired, stopping in her tracks when she noticed what I was holding. Her complexion drained of color. I barely managed to ask, "Oh, why?" in a whisper. She called for Dad, who shortly appeared at the doorway. Upon seeing the will in my hands, his expression changed from confusion to a defensive stance. "You shouldn't be rummaging through our personal documents," he said, his annoyance evident rather than remorseful. "I was looking for the insurance policy," I explained. "Mom asked me to find it. This fell out of the folder." I lifted the will. "Why is everything going to Travis?" They exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. Eventually, Mom sat down on the small office couch and motioned for me to join her. Dad stayed standing, arms crossed. "Sweetheart, we love you both equally," Mom started, speaking softly as if to a child. "But Travis requires more support. You know that. You've always demonstrated such capability." Dad chimed in, "You have a solid job, savings, and a stable lifestyle. Travis has struggled. He requires a safety net." I couldn't hide the bitterness in my response. "So my reward for being responsible is nothing, while his lifetime of irresponsibility earns him everything?" "It's not like that," Mom pleaded. "We're just being practical. Travis has committed to taking care of us in our later years. He's promised to move in when we need extra assistance." I laughed in disbelief. "Travis? The same Travis who forgets to call you on your birthday? The one who has never kept a job longer than 8 months? He's what you're relying on?" "He's changing," Dad asserted. "He's more mature now." "And what about the $43,000 I have given you over the last 6 years?" I inquired. "Does that mean nothing?" Mom appeared taken aback. "You've been keeping count?" "Of course. It's my money. Money I worked hard for, which could have been used for my own home or retirement." "We appreciate your help," Dad replied stiffly. "But that doesn't give you the right to determine how we manage our assets. It's our money, and we can do as we please with it." His words stung sharply. I had believed all these years that I was contributing due to our family ties, that we supported one another. Now, it felt as if I was merely an ATM expected to dispense funds unquestioningly while plans were in place to reward Travis for his lack of effort. "It's just material things, dear," Mom said, reaching for my hand. I pulled back. "If it's merely stuff, why not share it evenly? Why does Travis receive everything?" Neither of them could respond. "I should leave," I said, rising. The room felt constricting and overly warm. I needed fresh air. "Naomi, please try to comprehend," Mom called after me as I walked out. "We love you," Dad added, although he made no move to stop me. I nodded stiffly, unable to articulate anything past the lump in my throat. I gathered my purse and keys from the dining room, exiting without another word. The image of that will was seared into my memory. As soon as I closed my car door, tears streamed down my face, fierce, angry tears that blurred my vision so I couldn't even start the engine. I sat in my parents' driveway, sobbing as I hadn't since my teenage years. It wasn't solely about the will, that was just the trigger. It encapsulated a lifetime of feeling devalued and less significant than my brother. After approximately 15 minutes, as the initial emotional surge subsided enough for me to drive safely, I left their home. I didn't return home, but instead headed to the small park near my apartment where I often went to reflect. Sitting on a bench overlooking the pond, I called Melissa. What?" she nearly shouted when I shared the news about the will. "After everything you've done for them, that's utterly messed up, Nat." "I know," I replied, watching a family of ducks gliding across the water. "I just can't grasp how they could do this." "Because they take you for granted," Melissa replied frankly. "They understand you'll always be there, always help, always be responsible." Meanwhile, Travis is rewarded for being a total letdown. Her indignation on my behalf was comforting. I wasn't overreacting. This truly was unfair. "What are you planning to do?" she asked. "I'm not sure yet," I confessed. "I need to think." After discussing for nearly an hour, I called David to see if he could meet up. We convened at our favorite coffee shop, where I recounted the entire story again. Unlike Melissa's immediate outrage, David listened thoughtfully. "That really sucks," he acknowledged once I finished. "I can understand why you feel hurt." "What would you do?" I inquired. He took a sip of his coffee before responding. "Honestly, I would cease giving them money, not out of spite, but because it's evident it's neither appreciated nor acknowledged. You've been jeopardizing your financial future for people who aren't considering you in theirs." "But they are my parents," I protested, expressing the worry that had been holding me back. "What kind of daughter just stops assisting her parents?" David replied softly, referring to the type of person who has already received more assistance than most. "This is someone who must start placing herself at the forefront of her priorities since no one else is doing it for her." That night, alone in my apartment, sleep eluded me as I replayed my conversation with my parents, reflecting on all the things I should have articulated. I got up around 2 a.m. and began to do some calculations. I retrieved bank statements, credit card bills, and budget spreadsheets from the last 6 years. The final sum was astonishing. In addition to the $43,000 in direct financial aid, there were numerous other expenses, including groceries. I had purchased household necessities and covered dinners that I had treated them to. The actual total came closer to $55,000. I then pondered what that money could have accomplished for me. If I had invested it, even in a conservative manner, it would have grown significantly. Should I have allocated it toward a home down payment, I would be a homeowner now instead of a renter. Simply saving it would have provided me with a robust emergency fund and enhanced retirement stability. Instead, I had offered it to parents who held me in such low regard that the only thing they planned to leave me was an old china set in their will. I recalled all the sacrifices I had made, including the trip to Japan that David and I had intended to take for our anniversary, which was canceled due to my mom's need for dental work not covered by insurance. I remembered the smaller apartment I chose to keep my expenses minimal to assist with their mortgage and my aging vehicle that required constant repairs, which I clung to in order to preserve more money for my parents. All this while Travis lived a carefree life, never contributing, yet somehow he seemed deserving in their eyes. By morning, I had made my choice. I drafted a new budget that excluded any financial aid for my parents. It was an exhilarating yet scary feeling. I suddenly found myself able to afford things I had long denied myself, but there was also a sense of guilt, as if I was abandoning my family. Before I could change my mind, I sent them an email rather than making a phone call, wanting to ensure clarity and an absence of emotion, as I feared a conversation would become heated or dissolve into tears. "Dear Mom and Dad, after learning of the contents of your will yesterday, I have been contemplating a lot. I must inform you that I can no longer provide financial assistance. Over the past 6 years, I have contributed over $55,000 to your household expenses at the cost of my own financial aspirations. Discovering that you intend to leave everything to Travis made it apparent that my contributions have gone unrecognized. I love you both, but I need to focus on my own financial future now. I hope you can understand. Love, Naomi. I read it multiple times, making adjustments before finally hitting send. Then I turned off my phone and went for an extended walk to give them time to process before confronting their reaction. When I switched my phone back on 3 hours later, there were 5 missed calls from my mom, 3 from my dad, and several text messages that ranged from confusion to anger and hurt. One message from Mom read, "How could you do this to us? We never asked you for all that money." Dad had texted, conveniently omitting the numerous times they reached out with urgent requests for bill assistance. Another message read, "Is this some sort of blackmail to persuade us to change our will?" I chose not to respond to any of them. I wasn't using money as leverage to secure an inheritance. That was not my intent. The issue at hand was that I had been taken for granted, and it was time for me to assert myself. The following day, Sunday, they arrived at my apartment unannounced. My mom was in tears while my dad appeared both angry and perplexed. "We need to discuss your email," he said when I opened the door. I let them in, trying to maintain a calm demeanor that I didn't entirely feel. We sat in my small living room, where the tension was thick. "I meant what I wrote," I stated before they could interject. "I can no longer provide financial support." "Is this about the will?" Mom asked, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "Is that what matters to you, material things?" "No," I replied. "It's about respect and acknowledgement. The will simply clarified how you perceive my contributions." "We are grateful for everything you've done," Dad argued. "But that doesn't mean we owe you an inheritance." "I never claimed you did," I countered. "However, learning that you plan to reward Travis, who has not assisted you while taking my support for granted, has made it evident that I need to reassess my priorities." "So you're punishing us," Mom asserted. "I'm taking care of myself," I corrected. "It's about time I did this for myself, something I should have done many years ago." The conversation spiraled for almost 2 hours. They resorted to guilt, anger, and finally bargaining, suggesting they might reconsider the will if I continued to help them. That last tactic only solidified my determination. Their love, it seemed, was dependent on what I could do for them. They departed without reaching a resolution, both visibly distressed. I shut the door behind them and leaned against it, feeling drained yet oddly serene. For the first time in many years, I had prioritized my own needs. The following weeks turned out to be among the toughest I had ever faced. My parents initiated what seemed like a concerted effort to sway my decision. It began with daily phone calls that alternated between guilt-laden pleas and furious accusations. "The electric bill is due next week," my mom would say, her voice wavering slightly. "I don't know how we're going to manage." "We may have to sell the house," my dad cautioned in another conversation. "Is that what you wish for us, losing our home?" Despite their pleas, I stood my ground, though each discussion left me emotionally depleted. My mantra became, "I'm sorry you're struggling, but I can no longer be your financial support." When the phone calls failed to change my mind, they escalated to unannounced visits. They would appear at my apartment, sometimes together but often separately, often bearing small gifts or homemade meals as pacifiers before launching into repeating arguments. "We raised you better than this," my dad lamented one time, disappointment evident in his tone. "Family helps family." Yes, I agree. Family should help each other, but it must be mutual and appreciated, not just expected. The pressure wasn't only from my parents, as extended family began reaching out too. My Aunt Diana, my mom's sister, was especially relentless. "Your mother is beside herself," she shared during one call. "How could you do this to your own parents? Did they mention the will to you?" I countered. There was a pause. "Well, no, but that's private family business." "Exactly," I responded. "This is a matter between me and my parents." My cousin Susan texted, "I heard you're facing financial difficulties. I hope things improve so you can assist Aunt Catherine and Uncle Edward again." They were twisting the narrative, portraying me as financially unstable instead of confronting the truth. It was likely simpler than admitting they had exploited my generosity for years. Throughout all this, Travis remained unaware. According to Melissa, who encountered him at a local bar, he was completely oblivious to both the conflict and the will. "Your brother was buying rounds for everyone," she reported. Definitely not acting like someone worried about his parents' financial situation. The mounting stress began to spill into other aspects of my life. I struggled to focus at work, missing deadlines and making unusual mistakes. My sleep deteriorated. I would lie awake, replaying conversations and prepping for anticipated disputes. David noticed the strain I was under. "Maybe you should consult a professional about this," he suggested one evening as we relaxed on my couch, my head resting against him. "A therapist could assist you in working through everything." It was sound advice. The following week, I attended my initial appointment with Dr. Ashford, a family therapist recommended by a colleague. After I shared my experiences, she explained, "What you are going through represents a form of family role dysfunction. You have been assigned the role of the responsible caretaker while your brother is seen as the perpetual child needing protection and support. These roles can become rigid over time and are challenging to change." "What do I do now?" I inquired. "You have already taken the first, most challenging step by establishing a boundary," she replied. "Now you must maintain that boundary while managing your emotions regarding the situation." We discussed strategies for dealing with guilt, scripts to counter manipulative tactics, and techniques for staying even-tempered during confrontations. Most crucially, she affirmed my choice. "It's not selfish to protect yourself from exploitation," she reassured me. "In fact, it's essential for your own well-being." During this challenging period, David was my anchor. He listened without judgment, offered practical help, and provided distractions when I needed relief from the turmoil. He witnessed my tears, my frustrations, and my moments of doubt when I was nearly ready to give in, yet he never suggested I return to supporting my parents for the sake of harmony. "I admire your bravery," he told me one night. "Standing up to family is incredibly difficult." A month after learning about the will and ceasing financial assistance, I achieved a personal milestone. I declined a call from my mother without feeling excessive guilt afterward. It was a minor win but significant nonetheless. On that same day, I received a message from my aunt stating that my parents were struggling financially and had begun selling possessions. The intent was clearly to induce guilt, but instead, I wondered why they weren't reaching out to Travis for help. I had recommended it several times, but they always had excuses ready. He was between jobs, he had his own bills, he wasn't good with money. While those claims were accurate, they conveniently overlooked those issues while expecting me to continue making sacrifices. The upcoming family event was my cousin Ryan's wedding. I considered skipping it to evade the unavoidable clash, yet Dr. Ashford urged me to attend. She noted that avoidance only strengthens the notion that one has erred. Attending with confidence sends a distinct message. Thus, I decided to go with David as my date. The ceremony was beautiful, though the reception felt strained. My parents were seated at a separate table, casting occasional glances in my direction without approaching me. Other relatives whispered among themselves, some offering support while others appeared to judge. My Aunt Diana approached me at the bar, delivering a lecture on the importance of family above all else, as that was how we had been raised. "I value family, too," I replied, utilizing one of the responses Dr. Ashford and I had rehearsed, "but respect and appreciation should be mutual." She seemed unconvinced, but before she could reply, she was summoned elsewhere. Later, Travis arrived late and already slightly inebriated. He greeted our parents enthusiastically, completely oblivious to the underlying tension. Spotting me across the hall, he waved cheerily, indicating he was unaware of our conflict or simply indifferent. As the evening progressed, I caught snippets of conversation between my parents and other relatives discussing financial troubles, medical expenses, and the burdens of home repairs, all clearly aimed at me. David gently squeezed my hand under the table and asked, "You all right?" I nodded, revealing that I felt better than expected, indeed. The feeling of guilt lingered but was not as overwhelming as it had been. I was starting to truly believe I deserved more than being their financial fallback while my irresponsible brother held more value. A few days post-wedding, I received a text from my mother that shifted everything. It lacked any greeting or small talk, comprising only 5 words that explicitly depicted her view of our relationship. The mortgage is due $1,450. On Tuesday morning, while I was preparing for a crucial client presentation, my phone pinged. I briefly glanced at it, anticipating a goodwill message from David or a query from a colleague, only to find it was from my mother. It was a bare demand for money, devoid of any warmth, no greetings, no expressions of missing me, not even my name. It was as if I were regarded merely as an ATM. A wave of hurt, anger, and disbelief washed over me. After a month of limited contact following discussions about boundaries and mutual respect, this was how she chose to reach out. I placed my phone down and took several deep breaths employing Dr. Ashford's techniques. Once calm, I picked up my phone again, contemplating my response. My initial thought was to pen a detailed explanation of why her demand was inappropriate and hurtful, while my second instinct was to ignore the message altogether. Neither option felt satisfactory. I typed several replies, erasing each one. "I already told you I can't assist financially anymore. Have you consulted Travis for aid?" This was exactly the reason I established boundaries. None conveyed my true sentiment, that I deserved to be treated like a daughter, not just a financial asset. Eventually, after nearly 20 minutes of contemplation, I typed a concise 2-word response and sent it, "Ask Travis." It was straightforward, clear, and indirectly reminded her of why our relationship was strained without being needlessly harsh. Her reply was almost instantaneous, a flurry of messages. "How could you? After everything we've done for you, Travis has no part in this. We need immediate help." I chose not to respond, opted to silence my phone, and went back to preparing for my presentation, though my focus was compromised. Later that evening, my father called. Though I was hesitant to answer, I felt it was better to confront the situation. "Your mother is upset," he stated bluntly when I picked up. "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied casually. "What kind of response was that?" he questioned. "Do you think it's a joke?" "No, Dad, I don't. I think it's a rational suggestion. You've decided that Travis will inherit all your assets. It stands to reason he should help maintain them." "Travis can't help right now," Dad retorted, his tone laced with frustration. "And I can no longer be taken for granted," I shot back. He fell silent for a moment before proposing, "We need to discuss this together, face to face, including Travis." I consented to dinner at their place that Friday, marking the first time the 4 of us would gather since discovering the contents of the will. When Friday arrived, anxiety mingled with preparation. Dr. Ashford and I had mapped strategies for the meeting, and David had assisted me in rehearsing potential responses. He suggested accompanying me, yet I felt it was something I had to face alone. I reached my parents' home precisely at 6:30, the time we had agreed upon. Although the house looked unchanged, it felt different to me now that I understood my role in their lives better. Mom opened the door, wearing a face that combined anger and concern. Unlike usual, she didn't embrace me. "Travis is already here," she mentioned, guiding me towards the dining area where Dad and Travis were seated at the table. Travis appeared bewildered. "Hey, sis," he greeted with his characteristic casual wave. "What's the family meeting about?" Mom and Dad are acting all secretive. Apparently, they hadn't informed him. Interesting. We took our seats for dinner, which featured pot roast, my father's favorite dish. The discussion was awkward, revolving around benign subjects such as the weather and Travis's new job opportunity involving a food delivery app he was collaborating on with a friend, reminiscent of his previous unsuccessful endeavors. Eventually, while Mom served coffee and pie, Dad coughed, signaling he wanted to speak. We need to address the family finances, he began. As you both are aware, your mother and I are encountering some difficulties. The medical expenses keep piling up, and with the decrease in income from both our jobs, it's becoming harder to keep up. Travis nodded empathetically but didn't voice any comments. Naomi has been assisting us for several years, Dad said, glancing in my direction. However, she has recently chosen to stop doing so. Travis looked taken aback. Really? Why's that? Before I could reply, Mom interjected. She discovered our will and is upset about it. Your will? Travis's confusion deepened. What does that have to do with anything? Everything is left to you, I stated plainly. The house, the investments, all except for Grandma's porcelain set, which goes to me. Travis's eyes widened. Everything? Everything, I confirmed. Dad nodded. We believed it to be the best arrangement since you require more support than your sister, and I have been aiding them for 6 years. I added, that amounts to over $55,000 in direct financial assistance, not to mention countless other forms of help. All while you have contributed nothing. Travis glanced down, clearly embarrassed. I didn't realize it was that significant, he murmured. Whether you knew or not is irrelevant, I responded. The crux is that I have been taken for granted, expected to assist without acknowledgement or gratitude, while you reap rewards for inaction. That isn't fair, Mom interjected. We value everything you've done. Do you? I challenged. Because your text this week didn't reflect gratitude, it resembled entitlement. What text? Travis inquired. I retrieved my phone and displayed the message. The mortgage is due, $1,450. He winced. Yeah, that's pretty severe, Mom. We were in dire straits, she defended. And where were you when they needed assistance? I directed at Travis. What have you been doing for the past 6 years? He shifted uncomfortably. I've been dealing with my issues. Your issues? I echoed. Like unsuccessful business attempts and jobs you left because they were mundane? Meanwhile, I've paused my life to support Mom and Dad. No one asked you to do that, Dad countered. Yes, you did, I argued. Every time you called about unpaid bills, every mention of uncovered medical expenses, every expression of worry regarding the mortgage, those were requests for assistance. The discussion intensified. My parents defended their will decision, claiming it was their right to allocate their assets as they wished. Travis largely stayed mute, occasionally trying to lighten the mood with jokes that didn't connect. Then, during a particularly charged dialogue about equity and familial responsibilities, Travis voiced something that shifted the entire atmosphere. Look, I understand why you're upset, he told me. But I'm the son in this family, the son inherits. That's just how it's always been. The room fell silent. My parents appeared uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Is that true? I questioned them. Is this a gender issue? Of course not, Mom quickly replied, but I noticed her gaze dart towards Dad. It's tradition, Dad finally acknowledged. My father left everything to me, not to my sisters, and mine did the same. A peculiar clarity washed over me. This situation wasn't merely about Travis needing more support or my contributions being unrecognized. It was rooted in an antiquated and sexist tradition that prioritized sons over daughters, disregarding merit and effort. It's 2023, I remarked softly. Not 1923. Times change, Dad responded curtly. But values do not. If your values include treating your daughter as less valuable than your son, despite all evidence suggesting otherwise, perhaps those values need re-evaluating, I said, standing up. I believe I've heard enough. Naomi, please, Mom began, but I shook my head. I love you both, but I cannot proceed like this. I refuse to be undervalued or viewed as inferior simply because I am a daughter and not a son. I left, disregarding their pleas for me to return. As I drove home, I felt a sense of relief, as if a burden I had borne for years had finally lifted. The harsh truth, though painful, provided me with clarity. The following day, Travis messaged me, asking, "That was intense. Are you okay?" I replied, "I will be." He responded, "For what it's worth, I agree with you. The whole inheritance thing for sons is quite unjust." I wasn't aware that was their rationale. At least it's some acknowledgement that the situation is unfair. In the days that followed, I received numerous messages from my parents, alternating between defensive explanations and attempts to reconcile. I answered politely but succinctly, upholding the boundary I had established. The 2 months following my family dinner confrontation were life-changing. Without the financial strain of supporting my parents, I discovered resources, both financial and emotional, that I hadn't had in years. The first step I took was to consult a financial advisor. With my revised budget, I could boost my retirement contributions, begin saving for a house down payment, and even plan a long-awaited vacation to Japan with David that we had postponed 3 years prior. "You're actually doing better than many people your age," the advisor noted. "You have a good income and low debt. Without the extra costs from your parents, you'll make notable progress toward your goals in just a few years." It was affirming to know that my financial decisions had been wise, except for the money I had given away. With a solid plan established, I felt a sense of security regarding my future that I hadn't experienced in years. My therapy sessions with Dr. Ashford remained crucial in my healing journey. We explored the family dynamics that had influenced my relationships with my parents and brother. "What you went through is all too common," she explained in one session. "Many families, even those who consider themselves progressive, still have unconscious gender biases affecting their behavior towards sons and daughters." We worked on exercises designed to help me recognize and confront these internalized expectations. I had spent much of my life trying to validate my self-worth through responsibility and sacrifice, believing that if I did enough, my parents would value me as much as they did Travis. Now, I was learning to value myself. "Your worth isn't defined by what you do for others," Dr. Ashford reminded me. "It's inherent in who you are." During this period, my bond with David deepened. He had witnessed my vulnerability and supported me without judgment. We began to have more serious discussions about our future, including marriage. "I love the strength you've shown," he mentioned one evening as we strolled by the riverfront. "Not that you were ever weak, but the confidence you exude now is wonderful to see." My friendships also grew stronger. Melissa organized a monthly dinner with friends who had encountered similar family struggles, creating a supportive atmosphere. Sharing experiences and coping strategies proved therapeutic, making me feel less isolated in my challenges. At work, my performance improved, freed from the ongoing stress of my parents' financial demands. I was more focused, creative, and open to taking risks. 6 months after establishing my boundary, I was promoted and awarded a substantial raise. In the meantime, according to family and friends who remained in touch, my parents were facing difficulties. Without my financial assistance, they had to make tough decisions. They began selling personal items, starting with my father's collection of vintage watches and my mother's jewelry. They also reluctantly reached out to Travis for help. According to my cousin Ryan, who kept a neutral stance in the conflict, Travis offered minimal assistance. He made one mortgage payment just as they were nearing foreclosure but later claimed he could not provide further help. He asked them for a loan last month, Ryan revealed during our coffee chat. Can you believe that? After they helped with his mortgage payment, he wanted to borrow $2,000 for his food delivery app project? I wasn't shocked. Travis had never had to learn financial responsibility since our parents consistently came to his rescue, and now that they couldn't, he was lost. In an unexpected development, I received a call from my Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, with whom I had always shared a close relationship, though she lived across the country. I heard about what happened, she said. Your cousin Susan shared some details, but I'd like to hear your perspective. I detailed everything from the years of financial support to the discovery of the will and the implications regarding sons inheriting everything. That sounds just like my brother-in-law, she sighed. He was always excessively traditional, and my sister complied with whatever he desired. What came next shocked me. I have been diagnosed with cancer, she stated bluntly. Stage 4, and the outlook isn't optimistic. Aunt Helen, I'm so sorry, I gasped. No need for that, dear. I've had a fulfilling life. However, I'm arranging my affairs and want you to be aware that I have left everything to you in my will. I objected, insisting that she didn't need to do this, and that I wasn't expecting an inheritance from anyone. I understand that, which is why I wish to do it. I've always noticed how your parents favored Travis while you labored doubly for half the acknowledgement. Although my estate isn't substantial, it is something. And differently than your parents, I believe in recognizing those who exhibit character and responsibility. 2 weeks later, Aunt Helen peacefully passed away in her sleep. True to her word, she bequeathed me her modest savings, her small Oregon house, and a heartfelt letter that moved me to tears. In it, she wrote, "Naomi, never doubt your worth. Some people fail to see the treasure right before them because they're too busy searching elsewhere. Your strength, kindness, and integrity are precious qualities. I take pride in calling you my niece and am even prouder of the woman you've become." I decided to allocate part of the inheritance to start a scholarship fund in Aunt Helen's name for young women aspiring to enter male-dominated fields. The remainder was invested based on my financial advisor's counsel. The Oregon house, a delightful cottage near the coast, turned into a vacation getaway that David and I frequented when we wanted to escape city life. However, this unexpected inheritance represented more than just the money, although that aspect was beneficial. It was about being acknowledged and valued for my true self, something my parents had never genuinely provided. As for my parents, we remained in minimal contact, exchanging calls on birthdays and significant holidays, sending cards, and occasionally meeting for coffee in neutral venues. These meetings were polite, yet distant, lacking the closeness we once shared. Conversely, Travis surprisingly reached out more often. The family confrontation seemed to have awakened something in him. He secured a steady job at a tech firm while still discussing his app development dreams on the side. During one of our occasional lunch catch-ups, he confessed, "I never realized how much you were doing for Mom and Dad, or how unfair the whole inheritance situation is." He didn't propose any changes to the will, nor did I ask him to. That was between him and our parents. Nevertheless, there was a newfound awareness within him, a glimpse of the responsibility he had long avoided. By the end of that pivotal year, I had made considerable personal progress, learning to set boundaries, to value myself independent of others' judgments, and to recognize unhealthy family dynamics without being tethered to them. I was no longer the family's ATM or the dutiful daughter who sacrificed herself for others' unappreciative ways. I was Naomi, strong, capable, and deserving of respect, not in spite of my gender, but irrespective of it. 6 months post-confrontation, on a crisp autumn day, I received an unanticipated call from my father. "Can we meet?" he requested, his voice devoid of its usual authority. "Your mother and I would like to discuss something with you." We decided to congregate at a neutral location, a coffee shop midway between our residences. Upon my arrival, I found them already seated at a corner table, looking older and more fatigued than I recalled. "Thank you for coming," Mom said as I took my seat. An uncomfortable silence fell before Dad began speaking. "We've been reflecting on everything, about the will, about how we've treated you." I listened intently, not wanting to assume the direction this conversation would take. "Travis hasn't been." Dad paused, seemingly searching for the correct phrasing. "He hasn't been as dependable as we hoped. He helped once with the mortgage," Mom added. "But then he asked for a loan the very next month for his app idea." I nodded but remained silent. "We may have been wrong," Dad finally conceded, the words seeming especially heavy for him regarding many issues. It was the closest approximation to an apology I had ever heard from him. We miss you, Mom remarked, reaching across the table to take my hand. And we now realize how much we took you for granted. We've been struggling without your assistance, Dad acknowledged. But that isn't why we wanted to see you. We wanted to inform you that we're altering our will. I shook my head. That's unnecessary. This was never about the inheritance itself. Well, we recognize that, Mom replied. But it signifies something, the injustice of it. We're dividing everything equally between you and Travis, Dad declared. It's the correct course of action. Although I appreciated the gesture, I recognized that it held less significance for me now than it once had. My value was not determined by the inheritance they left behind. Thank you, I replied simply, expressing my appreciation. For almost 2 hours, we conversed about topics we had long avoided. They revealed their financial hardships and the unexpected changes they had to make to tighten their budgets. I shared news about my job promotion, my plans with David, and the scholarship fund I created in Aunt Helen's honor. We are proud of you, Mom remarked towards the end of our discussion. We should have expressed that more frequently. This marked a beginning, even if it was not a complete reconciliation. We set a date to have dinner together the following week. Over the ensuing months, we began to repair our relationship under new guidelines. Although I did not reinstate financial assistance, I occasionally helped in minor ways, such as purchasing groceries during my visits or treating them to dinner. Importantly, these gestures came from my own free will, without conditions, and were welcomed with sincere appreciation. My relationship with Travis also grew more transparent. He took strides towards accountability, maintaining his position at the tech firm and occasionally contributing to our parents' finances. I never realized just how much pressure you were under, he shared during one of our now routine brotherly lunches. I was so accustomed to being rescued that I never learned to be independent. Better late than never, I replied, smiling. My life continued to flourish. David proposed to me during our long-delayed trip to Japan, beneath the cherry blossoms in Kyoto. We purchased a modest but cozy home in a neighborhood we adored, living within our means. My career advanced at a steady pace, and my renewed focus led to creative campaigns that garnered industry acclaim. Freed from the burden of constant financial anxiety, I could take measured risks that proved beneficial for my career. The scholarship fund established in Aunt Helen's name awarded its initial grants to 3 deserving young women, a legacy I was proud to create. Ultimately, her final gift to me transformed into a blessing for others as well. Reflecting on my journey from that pivotal day, I recognized just how much I had evolved. I had changed from someone who sought validation through self-sacrifice to a woman who comprehended her intrinsic value. This lesson was challenging but essential. Setting boundaries was not an act of selfishness, it was a means of self-preservation and a demonstration of self-love. I had realized that helping others should stem from choice and abundance rather than a sense of obligation or depletion. Moreover, I recognized that family dynamics, like all relationships, necessitate mutual respect and reciprocity for true health. Love alone cannot suffice if it is not accompanied by actions reflecting value and appreciation. Perhaps most significantly, I learned that asserting oneself does not equate to losing family. Instead, it creates opportunities for more genuine connections grounded in equality rather than exploitation. My parents and I may never achieve the relationship I once envisioned, but we have forged something more authentic. Travis and I have progressed beyond the dynamics of the favored child and the responsible one into a more equitable sibling connection. Additionally, I found a chosen family in David, my friends, and the community I cultivated, consisting of those who valued me for who I truly was. As I envision the future, I no longer fear being taken for granted or undervalued. I understand my worth, and I recognize that true love does not require you to diminish yourself for others. Have you ever had to establish tough boundaries with relatives who undervalued you? How did you manage it and what insights did you gain? Please share your experiences in the comments below. If this narrative resonates with you, consider liking and subscribing for more stories about finding strength amid challenging family dynamics. And remember, standing up for yourself is not selfish, it is essential. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own path to recognizing your self-worth.